We're on our fifth program of the seven-part series on the Epistle of St. James. If you have a Bible, I hope that you'll get it and follow along with me. We're looking at chapter 3 of St. James' Epistle today. St. James' Epistle is the book that immediately follows the book of Hebrews in the New Testament. Hebrews is easy to find because it's so big, and St. James, the little book, is right after it, so it's easy to find it if you can find Hebrews. What I am about to do in this half hour is embark on a very dangerous journey. I'm about to do something that is extremely perilous. And what is it that I'm going to be doing? I am going to teach. In St. James' Epistle, chapter 3, verse 1, he wants everyone to know who pretends that they're going to be a teacher, who wants to be a teacher, who aspires to be a teacher, that they are doing something that is extremely dangerous and extremely perilous. Listen to verse 1 of chapter 3. My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. I like when he says we, because St. James realizes, obviously, that as he's writing this epistle, that he himself is a teacher, that he's teaching in this epistle, and that he is part of that group of people called teachers who will receive a stricter judgment. Well, what are the implications of what he's just said? Well, first of all, there's an objective truth that needs to be taught. Now, I've talked about this before on Tradition Today, and Lord willing, I'll talk about it again on Tradition Today. And one of the reasons that I make this point is that there seems to be a movement in Christian education of recent years that says that if a teacher can bring out of you the faith journey that you have lived, that they have done a good thing, that they have done the work of Christian education. Or the other thing is to go to a Bible study and have a teacher read part of the Bible and then say, well, what does this mean to you? You see, it's something that when I talk to people sometimes about their faith, a lot of times they'll begin with those words that tell me that they don't believe in objective truth. And the words are, for me. For me, God is like, or for me, church is, and so on and so forth. Well, that's not the way truth is. There is an objective truth, and it needs to be taught as such. There's no variation from it that's allowed. Now, that's hard to hear. It's something that we don't really want to hear, but it's what St. James is saying. Let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. Well, a stricter judgment about what? A stricter judgment about what you have taught. Secondly, there's a judgment. There is a judgment made that says that some people will be found worthy and other people will not be found worthy. Again, this is something that has lost its flair in American Christianity, especially as we like to say that everybody has a little bit of the truth. Everybody is going to be saved. All the churches and all the people that don't go to churches and all the dogs and cats and birds and flowers are going to be saved and go to heaven because they did the best that they could. This isn't what St. James is saying. In fact, the whole New Testament is filled with teaching that opposes that. There is going to be a judgment, and in the judgment there are going to be some who are judged unworthy of the kingdom of God. Let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. And then Also, I think St. James wants to say this because he has found something that all of us who are teachers in the church have found at one time or another, and that is that teaching sometimes leads to arrogance. One must submit to the authority of the truth and not teach what you simply have figured out in your mind. That's hard sometimes. It's hard to say, I'm going to research carefully what the truth is and then teach that, as opposed to, driving along in your car, listening to your radio and saying, well, this is the way I would like Christianity to be, so I'm going to, that's the kind of thing I'm going to say to people when we talk about Christianity. I'm going to tell them that I believe this and this and this because it makes sense to me. You see, this was the problem with the heretics. Throughout Christian history, there have been a number of prominent heretics. Nowadays, we don't really have prominent heretics. We still have a lot of heresies. We don't have as many prominent heretics. We have a few here and there, but in the early church, you had a person like Arius or Nestorius. Those people were people who really wanted to figure out the truth for themselves. And they thought about it and they thought, I know the way it works. I know what the truth is. And they went out and they began to teach it. And after a while, as bishops and other priests and other, people began to hear what they were teaching, they would go to them and they would say, no, you're not teaching the truth. What you're teaching is wrong. And what did the heretics do? Almost to a person. The heretics would always say, no, I'm right. What I'm teaching is right. I will not take it back. I will not renounce what I have taught. And they continued to teach what the falsehood that they themselves came up with in their minds. This is a terrible thing. And it's something that every single person that teaches is in danger of. Now, I like to think that I'm the kind of a person that if I'm teaching on Tradition Today or something like that, somebody sees it and calls me up on the phone and says, you're teaching the wrong thing. I like to think that I'm the kind of person that humbly says, okay, you tell me the truth. You give to me the truth, and I'll listen to you, and I will try to see what it is that if God wants me to change. I try to be a humble person. Well, unfortunately, I have received some telephone calls now and then from people who are, I don't know, they're kind of wacky, and they don't really, I don't know what they are, but I can't really discuss the truth with them on any objective level, because all they want to do is kind of yell a few things on the phone and then hang up or something like that. But you want to be, as a teacher, as close to the truth as you can be and hang on to that. But to understand where it is that the truth ends and you begin, and to let go of that should the occasion call for it. Enough, let's go on. This is an interesting chapter. Very little of it has to do with teaching. We're in St. James' Epistle, chapter 3, and we're going to read verses 2 through 8 together. Read along with me. For we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able to also bridle the whole body. Indeed, we put bits in horses' mouths that they may obey us, and we turn their whole body. Look also at ships. Although they are so large and driven by fierce winds, they are turned by a very small rudder wherever the pilot desires. Even so, the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles. And the tongue is a fire, a work of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird, reptile, and creature of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by mankind, but no man can tame the tongue. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Now, again, St. James reverses the order of things. Whereas before it was faith and works. And you might say that faith comes first and then works follows. And St. James turns the two of them around and even, in fact, then joins the two together as if they're the same thing. This is happening here too. He says, now it's what you say and what you do. What you say is one thing and what you do is another thing. You say something and then you do it. Say, I'm going to go to the store, and then you go to the store. I believe in Jesus Christ, and then you act like a person who believes in Jesus Christ. What you say and what you do. St. James takes them and he turns them around. He says, no, actually what you do influences what you say. What you say influences what you do. And in fact, by saying those things, he almost makes them into one. He makes them into one and the same. James says that what we do is influenced by what we say. That is, the tongue is the rudder of the ship. And what comes out of the tongue, what comes out of the mouth, determines the direction that the body takes. It's like a bit in a horse's mouth, and you pull it a little bit in that direction, and the whole horse goes in that direction. You see, so he's saying just the opposite of what he was saying before. Before he was saying, you say that you're a Christian, but you don't act like one. Now he's saying that when you talk, it influences how you act. This is what I love about St. James. St. James is not about sitting around saying, well, let's be real precise in our philosophical thought. It's not like St. James. St. James wants to get right down to brass tacks. He wants to get right down to what's practical. When you talk, it influences what you do. When you do things, it influences what you say, yes. When you talk, that carries you like a rudder of a ship and like a bit in a horse's mouth. This is similar to the teaching of Jesus, his half-brother. It's very similar. When he asks people to say what they want. Did you notice that about Jesus? He comes up to a blind man sitting by the side of the road. The blind man is sitting there and calls out to him, Lord, have mercy, like this. Jesus stops and he asks him what he wants. Now, doesn't that strike you as odd? If you're walking down the street and you're a person who can heal people's illnesses, and there's a blind man sitting on the ground in the dirt who calls out to you for help, are you going to stop and say to him, what do you want? Do you want a new car? You can't have one because you're blind, and continue down the road? No. You would say to him, oh, you want to be healed of your blindness. But Jesus doesn't. Jesus stops and he says, what do you want? Why does he do that? Because he wants him to speak it. He wants you to say what it is you want. Just like he wanted the demons in Gennesaret when he sailed over the Sea of Galilee and he was near the men in the tombs. He says, tell me what your name is. Speak it forth, and thereby you have some power. In the case of the illness, the man speaks it forth and Jesus is able to heal him. In the case of the demons, they speak forth their name and thereby Jesus has some control over them. This is exactly the same thing that happens in confession. I mean, can I sit by myself in silence and think about my sins and thereby get God to forgive me? Yeah, if I ask him to forgive me of my sins. But it's completely different when I go to the priest, when I go to my spiritual father, and I say what it is that stands between me and God, and I tell him what I've been doing that has filled my life with unrighteousness, it is completely different. If you have never been to confession, I know that you can imagine it's completely different. And if you have been to confession, I'm sure you remember how different it is. Let's go on. We're reading from chapter 3, verses 9 through 12. With it we bless our God. Now with it, he's talking about the tongue. With it we bless our God and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceed blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring send forth fresh water, and bitter from the same opening? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olives, or a grapevine bear figs? Thus no spring yields both salt water and fresh. I've talked about, I read, I think in the last program, last week, we read from Jesus where he says, a good tree does not bear bad fruit, and a bad tree does not bear good fruit. St. James is saying the same thing. You cannot have, or you should not have, spewing from your mouth both terrible things and good things. I used to work in an alcohol rehab center, and one of the rules of the center was that no profanity was allowed. And some of our clients were, what would you call, virtuosos at profanity. And it would occasionally slip out now and then, this profanity. I mean, I think once you give yourself over to profanity, that it just becomes a part of your life, and it does slip out. I think the reason more people don't swear around me is that they're not around me that much, and so they kind of watch themselves. And then when I go away, they start up again, which I think is a terrible thing. Anyway, clients would occasionally use profanity, and I had a staff member who would say to them, he would say one of two things. One was, "Do you eat with that mouth?" He'd walk up to them and look them right in the face. So, would you eat with that mouth? And the other thing he would say was, "Do you kiss your mother with that mouth?" You know, these are things, and it is true. The thing that's coming out of your mouth is so terrible. Do you actually eat with that same mouth? Or from that same mouth, do you sing a hymn in church? Do you pray the Lord's Prayer using that same tongue? This is the same thing that St. James is saying to us here. This is similar to a series that we did on tradition today some time ago called The Church as Spiritual Hospital. St. James, what he's doing now is he's beginning to join together, the way he did with faith and works, join them together. He's joining together what you say and what you do. And he joins them together in kind of like a circular fashion. That is to say, in the Church of Spiritual Hospital, we talked about the eye of the soul, that is the nous, which is in a person and is that part of you that is connected to God. Now that part is influenced by God and influences the body, but at the same time, it is influenced by the senses. So where you look with your eye, what you listen to with your ear, what you think about with your mind, that influences the soul, and the soul influences the body. So it's kind of like a constant circular motion. What comes into you influences who you are and influences what comes out of you. And that influences what comes in and then influences what comes out. So St. James is saying they're kind of the same thing, what you say and what you do. And in fact, toward the end here, he's even saying speaking itself is a work. Speaking itself is a kind of action that denotes the level of your faith. I'm reading from verses 13 through 18. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy, self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, and demonic. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. What he's saying to you is that he goes from saying that for what you say influences what you do, to saying that both of those things make up who you are as a person. Both of those things make up the wisdom that defines you as a person. And there are two kinds of wisdom. There is one kind of wisdom that is earthly, and as he says here, demonic, that is bitter envy, self-seeking, lying, earthly, sensual, demonic, envy, self-seeking, confusion, and every kind of evil. You know, this is no good, obviously. And then verse 17, but the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Speaking is a work. St. James wants you to listen to yourself and thereby determine what kind of wisdom you have in your heart. You can tell. You can listen to yourself. Listen to the things you say. Listen to the things that you think. Did you ever spend a lot of time in prayer and find that your mind wanders? This happens to me especially when I'm tired and I get up in the morning and I sit down to pray and I begin to pray and I'm just fatigued. Maybe I got up a little early that morning. I wanted to do some things and I got up before I had really slept as long as I wanted to sleep. And I'm sitting there and I'm a little tired and my mind begins to wander. And really, where your mind goes at that time tells you something about your soul, tells you where you are spiritually, tells you about yourself. Do you have wisdom that comes from the earth? Wisdom that is demonic? Wisdom that is full of churning and bitterness and unpeacefulness? Or do you have wisdom that comes from above? It's pure, peaceable, gentle, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Those are the kind of things that you can see in wisdom that comes from above. And you can hear it in what you say. You can see it in what you do. And you can even tell by the way that you think. Well, now, I want to read a passage. As soon as I read about this, I knew that we would be talking today about the tongue and about speaking and about the amount of speaking that we do and so on and so forth. I thought immediately of a book I read a long time ago, Unseen Warfare. This was translated by Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain, who is now Saint Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain. He has a chapter called On Control of the Tongue. And this chapter is absolutely splendid. This writer, this is the spiritual combat of Lorenzo Scupoli. This particular writer writes in a way like St. James in terms of being very practical. And so I knew I would be talking about this today, and I wanted to go to this. But it is so wonderful that I want to read you directly from this text because it says everything that I would like to say. So here we are from looking at unseen warfare. The greatest necessity of all is to control and curb our tongue. That says it all right there, right? The mover of the tongue is the heart. This is what St. James was saying. What fills the heart is poured out through the tongue. You see that circular motion? What you think is what comes out of your mouth. What comes out of your mouth determines what you think. Conversely, when feeling is poured out of the heart by the tongue, it becomes strengthened and firmly rooted in the heart. Therefore, the tongue is one of the chief factors in building up our inner disposition. Isn't that something? You see, that I think that tells us that doing things like reading prayers that have been written by other people, perhaps long ago, that reading those prayers is a good thing. Getting them on your tongue helps us feed our souls. Good feelings are silent. The feelings which seek expression in words are mostly egotistical, since they seek to express what flatters our self-love and can show us, as we imagine, in the best light. Loquacity, which is like a lot of talking about what you know, mostly comes from a certain vainglory. I talked about that at the beginning of chapter 3. St. James says if you shouldn't want to be a teacher because it lends itself to arrogance, which makes us think that we know a great deal and imagine our opinion on the subject of conversation to be the most satisfactory of all. Ouch. So we experience an irresistible urge to speak out, and in a stream of words, with many repetitions, to impress the same opinion in the hearts of others, thus foisting ourselves upon them as unbidden teachers, and sometimes even dreaming of making pupils of men who understand the subject much better than the teacher. Now, I'm sure you've met people like this who want to talk to you, who want to tell you their opinion so much that they will not listen to anything that you say. Several weeks ago, I was with someone like this, that as soon as I started to say anything, she would break in and interrupt me and say what her opinion was in the matter. She didn't want to listen. This refers, however, to cases when the subjects of conversation are more or less worthy of attention. Other kind of conversations too, aren't there? But in most cases, loquacity is a synonym of empty talk. And there are no words to express the many evils which arise from this ugly habit, that is empty talk. In general, loquacity opens the door of the soul, and the devout warmth of the heart at once escapes. Empty talk does the same, but even more so. Loquacity distracts one's attention out of oneself, leaving the heart unprotected. Then the usual passionate interests and desires begin to steal into it, at times with such success that at the end of empty talk, the heart has not only consented, but has decided to commit passionate deeds. I know I can't continue to read. I wish I could read this. If you ever get a chance to buy this book, it's wonderful, Unseen Warfare. I don't even know if it's in print anymore, but it's a great book. What he's saying there is that when you're talking too much, you open up your soul. You open up your soul for whatever comes in. And sometimes at the end of talking too much, you find that you are desirous of committing a sin. I remember some time ago I had a person come and speak at my church. This was a spiritual person. The person came and spoke at my church, and then afterwards came and stayed at my house overnight with me and my family. When we got home from church, I said that we would have a cup of tea before we went to bed. Sometimes my wife and I have a cup of chamomile tea before we go to bed. The person said fine. And then as we sat and talked, we probably started talking at 9, and this person stopped talking at about midnight. And the whole conversation, which really wasn't a conversation, the person basically talked for that entire time. The whole time it was gossipy things about things going on in the church and other churches and things like that. When I went to bed that night, I felt like I wanted to take a shower. I felt so terrible. And since then, I have felt like that night brings back into my mind a sinful moment. We want to avoid that. We want to pay attention to the words of St. James and avoid allowing our tongue to spoil our souls. Well, now as we part company, we seek the intercessions of St. James, the brother of our Lord, for us, that we would be safe and healthy until we can get together again to study God's Holy Scriptures. God bless you.